they're able to basically prove what time you got. It's also like just getting into that low-hanging fruit of taking advantage of the seamlessness of using cryptocurrency. Like, it's very, very fast to interact. And it's just great to see that, you know, you can take your tokens from site to site and you don't need to add your credit card in every single time. Like, there's just so much low-hanging fruit like that that we really need to start to see more of. And Proxybots has been great at that. But yeah, that's probably my favorite app at the moment.
Yeah, Lumeos by far. That's actually, and I'm serious. Lumeos, I really like Lumeos for a couple of reasons. One, it's practical and usable, right? Like you can ask people to do polls for you, and that data is useful if you're a company. But also the design and the user experience is really where we need to be for blockchain apps, right? Ideally, people don't know that it's a blockchain-driven app, and that we do need to get there, right, for people to be able to do mainstream adoption. And if you look at the app, it's a beautiful app. It's got a good experience. It's got a lot of complexity to it, but a lot of it's hidden. So I really do like it a lot. In fact, it's, of the apps that I've used on EOS, it is my favorite. There are other apps that I really like. I mean, I like the Lynx wallet just because of its simplicity and its usability, right? Like, it's a wallet app, and most users, you know, we're all aware of wallet apps now. Hopefully in the future we don't have to worry about the plumbing so much to say, but it's important. And discoverability of other apps inside of the wallet app, you know, inside of Lynx is really good too. I love the notion that you can focus on something that's you can build something that's complex but very simple for people to use. And again, that's where we need to be able to get real users to use it. And then the gambling thing, I was just saying, some folks in my office, we EOS dice and whatever, because it's kind of fun, but I think the reason why gambling is so appropriate for blockchain, of course, you're outside the jurisdictional control, right? That's for one reason, but also it's like you have this incentive to win money and to gain from what you're using the app, and you can overcome the friction and pain of doing the onboarding, right? So there's so much friction and onboarding that you have to get over it, and what's the best way to do that? We'll have a strong profit motive and incentive to do that, right? So I think this is one of the reasons why gambling apps are prominent. But again, as the friction goes down, then we'll see more games. I really like the mythical games, what they're planning in terms of like digital collectibles and playing games. The CEO of that company, who also was Activision, but they also built this thing called Skylanders, which is this really popular, it's for kids really, but it became a $2 billion product in a couple of years. And what Skylanders was is you buy a figurine in a store, and then you stick it on your game console, and then the figure shows up in the game, right? So it's like physical to digital. And I think where we're at now is we could actually do the opposite, right? You could start with the digital asset, digital token, to drive some physical action in the real world. So I see what they're doing at Mythical is really interesting, because I think they're going to be doing, you know, the reverse Skylander, starting with a token and then making it do something real in the real world. And the other stuff they have in their vision is really interesting. So I definitely like what they're doing.
Yeah, a couple of dApps that I'd mention would be EOS Nights, because it's actually a fun interactive game that's got a ton of users. And it's I always lean towards gaming because I think that's going to be a big part of the adoption. But then this other trend that I see is dApps now focusing on hiding the blockchain and focusing really on UX. So there's companies like EVA, which is your Uber for the on the EOS blockchain, and EVA is launched in Canada. And they're actually doing ride sharing in the same way that Uber does, and it's on the EOS blockchain. The tokens are transferring in the background, but people are using this dApp with fiat on the front end, and they don't even need to know how to operate on the blockchain. They're just using fiat. It's operating on the blockchain. If they want to dig further in and they want to stake tokens or earn rewards and things like this, then they can do it, but it's not required. The blockchain's hidden. So because they're one of the first companies to kind of hide the blockchain behind a really good UX, I'm excited about EVA, and I'm excited for that trend in general. One of the other things that's cool about dApps is this ability to earn money. So I'll ask you guys, and we may have all the same answer, but what ways have you found to kind of take EOS and earn rewards? Ali may be able to talk about Ali can talk about what he wants to talk about, but Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking of this for a while. That one of the best thing about EOS is you can actually stake tokens to do other things for you, and that's like the basis of a lot of big applications like Shintai, where you can actually stake the EOS that you've made in order to give people CPU or net or lease some of your resources. But the other thing is you can also vote in your apps itself. So in your application itself, if it's taking in money and moving money around, at some point it's the smart contract powering your application will have X amount of tokens in it. The difference between, for instance, if those X amount of tokens were in like ETH, on Ethereum, you wouldn't be able to do much with them as compared to EOS, where you can do more things to them, become like actually like maybe like a bank where you can get some extra money out of your tokens, but at the same time you can vote, you can become more of a giver for CPU and other things, even powering your own applications through that extra money that you are making through your application, which is, I think, as a completely different business model as compared to traditional or other blockchains.
Yeah, one of the most exciting ways that I've seen to generate kind of dividends and money so far has been like, again with gambling, like if you own kind of the tokens for Bet Dice, you get a dividend in the casino, the take that they're making. And I've seen like they've come up with really innovative ways to give people a stake in that casino, and that's been basically some of the ways have been by referring new people to the casino, and then you get, you know, even more tokens. So I think that sort of thing, I'd like to see it outside of gambling, but I didn't even enjoy gambling myself, but seeing the innovative ways they've gotten people on board to like help in building an app, it's been amazing. And I think like Lumeos and other companies are going to be doing that as well. And you know, I think you can really make things really huge when you can partner with the community and make them a part of your business. So it becomes more of a community. So I think we're going to see like a securitization of digital assets, and that's going to be ongoing.
Yeah, so definitely just a couple of things. I mean, obviously you guys hit on really good points. I would say that also the mythical games, CEO had mentioned this on a live stream that he'd done, about how interesting it would be if you're sitting there playing your game, whether it's Pokemon Go or Candy Crush or whatever you're wasting your time on, right? In order, rather than just earning points that are useless, to actually be earning something of value, right? So it's taking it to the next level where you can actually be playing a casual game on your phone and earning something of value. Maybe you're getting a unique asset or something, or collecting something unique, and then being able to sell it or put it onto an auction site and get some money out of it. So I think that I'm really excited about the potential of you building a collection of digital assets for the different apps that you're using, and then being able to have mutability of them or fungibility of them, where I could sell them on an auction site or put them in an app that's a trophy case or that kind of thing, which is outside the barrier of that particular app, right? I think that's really powerful, and that's something that blockchain can do that you really can't do easily with just a traditional app, because things are going to be in that app silo. So the stuff you earn in that app are going to be in that app. Right, so I think that's cool. If you could make money by selling junk that you collected in a casual game, that would be useful. I collected some unique Pokemon this December. I would like to be able to monetize those. No chance. And let's see what else. Other money-wise would be like you're saying, like just on EOS alone, the Shintai is interesting. If you can lease it out, and they will delegate that resources out to help the community. So app developers can lease stuff and put lease EOS and allow users to use apps that are up to some good, as opposed to your EOS sitting there wasting collecting dust. So, yeah. But I definitely think the future would be digital collectibles, and that kind of thing would be very, very valuable beyond the gamble.
Yeah, digital collectibles would be really interesting all over the place. We saw what happened with CryptoKitties, and there's another thought with digital collectibles is if you've seen any like professional gaming, In the same way that Barry Bonds could hit a home run ball, and someone catches that ball, and they have that ball, and it's in a trophy case, and they can sell it. It has value. Someone could purchase a NFT, a non-fungible token. They could purchase the actual maybe magic sword that someone won the world championship of video games with. And with blockchain, you can prove that that's that unique sword that happened, that was part of that event. And so these digital collectibles through online sports or online gaming is a big thing too. And if you're unfamiliar with how big online gaming is, it's multiple times more viewers than the Super Bowl. So it's kind of, I don't watch professional gaming, but realizing that it's bigger than our biggest American sport is kind of mind-blowing. So those NFTs, those items are going to be really valuable someday. And to hit on what Justin was saying about the betting Dapp, I don't know if you guys were real clear on that, but you don't have to just bet within that app. You can own part of the casino. You can stake your tokens, and then you're the casino at that point. When people are losing money into that casino, you share a part of the rewards. So that's what's so magical about this Dapp. It's not some casino leeching off all the users. It's the users interacting with each other, and the ones who are staking gaining off the ones who are gambling. And maybe the one guy gambles too much for a month, and he decides, you know what, I'm going to put it in there and stake and wait a few months to get my money back before I do that again. So that's why I think part of the reason that concept's really catching on. So that kind of brings us into these interesting tokenomics or token models, ways that this money moves around, and there's a lot of ways that happens. And I just set a good example for in the betting platform. What are some of your favorite tokenomics things that you've seen out there? Favorite ways to either put money in, stake it, get it back, or earn rewards in interesting ways? And a good example could be, which is the Steam blockchain. It has a really interesting tokenomics system where you upvote and receive rewards from a staking pool. That's kind of one of my favorite. That's why I'm looking forward to hopefully a Steam at 2.0 coming onto EOS, because that's a really dynamic tokenomics system. Did any of you guys have any tokenomics?
Let me just comment on Steam for a second. The thing, like you just said, to me, I mean, honestly, so one of the things we're doing at our company is we're working through our token economic model, and we've iterated on it, and we're coming to a final model. And what's interesting about a blockchain company is you can build a blockchain company is essentially, potentially an economy in a box, right? I mean, so it's because it's self-governed. You can set up the rules, and you can essentially experiment on a whole new economic model that has never existed before in the history of the world, right? So our economy that we live in has sort of rules that are sort of understand and measured, but yet still kind of a black box to some degree. But with token economics, every single blockchain can be configured as its own economic experiment. So I do love the Steam model because it has this unique balance of incentives and disincentives, and I think it's a good example of what a good token economic model looks like. You want users to do things that add value to the network, and you do not want them to do things that detract or threaten it. And the idea that you have, a couple of things that are really interesting about Steemit is, Steemit is a place where you post content, and then people can vote on that content or comment on it. And of course, in a world where we have a lot of fake news and a lot of junk online and a lot of posts on Twitter or whatever that are negative, and people just generally look at it as being a sort of a negative experience, if you say something and you get beat up on, wouldn't it be great if you could have the community as a whole curate the negative content out of existence or lower its rating so that you don't see it in your feed? And part of the Steemit model is a percentage of the money that is made from for people who are posting content. A percentage of that goes to the people who are curating the content and who are early on looking for content that they know is going to be voted up, so they're incentivized early on to the process to say, this is going to be a good article, this is a bad article, vote up or down, and then share in the revenue of that article. And I think incentivizing the community to do things that drive the value is super powerful, right? That's the kind of thing that we want to capture in an economic model, so that You get the power of the community to crowdsource whether something is fake or not, or whether it's going to be negative or not, or whether it has any real value to the long-term value of the site or the community. So I just love that general idea, and actually I think it's proven that it does work, and although it can be gamed here and there, and so I again also looking for the next iteration. But yeah, that's definitely a good example, I think, of a good model.
Yeah, and with tokenomics, we can almost just say incentives as well. Tokenomics is just kind of a fancy word for like how you're building the incentive within the token structure, and that's what one of the most high-level interesting parts about blockchain in general is this idea that everything can be voluntary if we build the incentives correctly. And so what everyone's trying to do right now is at this base level, tweak the incentives in a way that people are incentivized to act, in a good way, basically, or in a way that's beneficial to the rest of society. So like in a bigger picture, it's this voluntary approach where the incentives are set correctly, which for me is so interesting. So do you guys have anything to add on tokenomics incentives?
So I like definitely this team model. I like the model where you have a token and then you have kind of that powers the platform, allows you to do certain aspects on the platform. One thing, we're also in the middle of finalizing a token, good token structure before actually having a token out there for people to use. But basically, one thing we've been thinking of is a token as a method of you using the platform. So you need X amount of tokens to unlock this feature. You need more tokens to unlock more advanced features. Makes you become part of the ecosystem and more involved in and basically incentivized to do what's best for the full ecosystem. I like also the models of Steam where you have multiple tokens, one that is used to power the platform, one that is used to kind of cash out like a stable coin, and one that can be volatile, but it doesn't matter, it is actually volatile. And that's the stuff we're thinking of. It's something similar to EOS Bet, where the bet token is doing one thing and then the other cryptocurrency that you're betting with is doing something else. So basically differentiating between coins and utility and securities and all that.
Yeah, I might just quickly mention, I think the EOS tokenomic model itself is quite great in that, the more tokens that you own on EOS, the more kind of stake you have in the say of who's going to be running the network, who the block producers will be, and also like voting in the referendum. Obviously, the more tokens that you have on the network, the more you're incentivized to make the right decisions. So I think it's sort of like a shareholder kind of voting scheme, but it's like digital and much more liquid. Those tokens also allow you to stake for CPU and bandwidth and RAM, so you can build on the network. It seems to be proven and it's working quite well. Other than that, I'd like to see a lot of models that kind of replicate what is already happening in the real world, but is more liquid in being a digital asset. I think there's a lot of tokenomic models out there where they're trying to reinvent the wheel and it's not working. And to some extent, I think we need to go back to what we know actually works. So yeah.
Yeah, on that note, on the reinventing the wheel, it's something that we kind of have seen a lot. It's swung towards, we're going to throw everything out the window, we're going to totally reinvent how we do everything, it's going to be completely decentralized. And now we've moved a little bit more back towards, okay, actually, we do know how to do some of this stuff already, and maybe blockchain is just an add-on, it's just a feature that's going to improve how we already do stuff, as opposed to completely replace it. So for me, that's a little bit bigger trend that I'm seeing with the Dapps as well. You can either talk about that or kind of what you see as the biggest challenges or hurdles for Dapps to overcome. You guys are all building projects, so yeah, either.
Let me just start by saying that, so this is something that we've seen. Actually, we just raised our last seed round, and we also got invested. We got an investment from Block One, who's the founders of producers of the EOS software. And what we saw with those guys who were working with the EOS VCs, and also the other VCs that were investing in blockchain, there's a lot of that their story has changed in the last 3 or 4 months, where now they're very much focused on whether you're, as a blockchain company, you're building something that is valuable, right? So the speculative bubble obviously has popped. We don't know whether things will come back, but it seems like it's following the typical, tech hype cycle. You have this blockchain will cure all ails, and it cure cancer and everything. You use it for everything on the blockchain. And then you have this trough of despair where it's like, holy crap, nothing really seems to work. And then you have this realization where it's useful for these things. And so this is really, I think, the trend that we're seeing right now, with certainly with the expression of the investors, folks who are actually making real investments right now. They're looking for products that have practical value and that have something that they can bring to market relatively quickly, and in the near term versus the long-term speculative future. So like you say, rather than reinventing the wheel for everything, that time will almost certainly come, but it takes a while for any sort of new model to pervade consciousness and usefulness. So definitely there's these cases that we've seen now where there's certain types of canonical use cases that are really useful for blockchain, and I think that's where you're going to see sort of smaller steps toward real value using tech that is blockchain enabled to solve problems that people have today, right? And then growing from it. That's definitely what we've seen, right? It's all about now, for the next foreseeable future, practical applications, solving real problems, as opposed to trying to make things perfect with blockchain or reinvent everything. So yeah, definitely, we've seen that.
I think one of the big barriers that I've seen has been getting an account in the first place. It's having to go to an exchange, in order to get the crypto before you can actually have an account and start interacting with applications. I think that's been a huge barrier that we're starting to overcome. Actually, Trey's project, Icon's Or ID, solves that with allowing you to, get an account by signing up with Facebook or Google. It's that easy, as easy as signing up for most of the apps these days. I think once we get to a stage where you can just sign up with something like Or ID and then start making crypto yourself without actually having to onboard, that's going to be huge. And then I think the one thing we need to solve after that is, how do you turn your crypto digital assets into fiat money, since like a lot of places still are only going to take fiat money. So either we make it easier to get your money out, or hopefully general retail and online stores like Amazon will hopefully start taking digital assets, so then we can just don't have that barrier to spend our money.
Yeah, I mean the rules of the game are still the same, whether it's you're building a regular company or a blockchain company. As long as you bring some extra value to your users, whether it's the user that are using our platform or are benefiting off the data from your platform, as long as you're bringing more value to them, whether it's extra money, whether it's less time, whether it's ease of use, then that's the goal of any kind of company. Now, if we can bring blockchain into whatever we're doing right now and using its features to make the lives of the users better, whether it's through micropayments or whether it's through transparency and all that, then that's the real value that we should focus on anyways, in order to bring real mass adoption. We just have to use the same skills, the same features that helps users, and then figure out how blockchain can actually help us do that. I mean, many projects I've seen, at least, don't really need blockchain, and they work. They still can do stuff with the blockchain or without it, but still, as long as you can bring that extra, that thing that the user is waiting for, you can ask them, you can see what's the problem, and then basically bring it to the users. That's, I think, what's very important in my opinion.
So not only are there a lot of Dapps being built, but as well, now the EOS itself is having clones of the chain with new incentives built in. And so that's something we've started to see a little bit more recently, where there's Meet.1, there's Boss, there is Telos, and there's multiple clones of EOS with different incentives. So the community is iterating and testing out these different models of how the whole blockchain itself might function. So let's talk a little bit about that. Maybe your thoughts on any of those side or sister chains.
Yeah, I think there's we have to first define the differences. There's like a side chain where you're running the exact same code but powering it for a different reason. There's also forks where you're actually changing the core logic. I think Telos might fall out more under that. And then there's just sister chains where they're just functioning to different functionality, but they can work in coherence with each other. I mean, definitely I've seen Dapps also doing the same model where they start as a Dapp and then realize, okay, maybe we should actually be a side chain. I think Everpedia is a good example of that, maybe even Meet.1 as well. And then, I don't know, it's kind of a new space, but I've been hearing of a lot of new projects just starting their fork of EOS for X. So they're just saying we're the EOS for X, Y, blah blah blah. And I don't know, like I'm still on the sidelines watching, seeing how things unfold. I mean, I think the main vision of EOS software, whether it's Block One, whether it's Dan Larimer, is that there needs to be multiple chains anyways, and they can work in coherence with each other. I mean, so far as a Dapp developer, I realized the same code that I'm running for EOS can actually work on Telos, can actually work on any other chain. It's just a matter of whether we want to do that or not. But as far as the chain goes, I think we just have to see what they're bringing to the table. I mean, if Boss really does the inter-blockchain connectivity, that would be really cool addition to their business. But again, like I am waiting right now, just seeing how things unfold.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to see on EOS.io technology that everyone has been really supportive of new chains popping up. It's like the total opposite to how it is in the Ethereum or the Bitcoin community, where like starting a new chain is like sacrilege and everyone hates on it. On EOS.io, I think, you know, we're all free market economists, and we believe that, you know, without that competition, you know, you have a monopoly chain basically. You have EOS block producers who aren't incentivized to compete against anything, because at the moment, it seems at least EOS is kind of leading the pack. As a technology, you can build apps on it and they're scalable, and no one else is really achieving that. Perhaps maybe Tron. But by having all these sister chains like Telos, who have like inverse weighted voting, that encourages people to vote for, you know, the best block producers and vote for 30 block producers as opposed to just vote for themselves, it creates that competition that forces chains to continually try and do better. And they're, like with Boss recently, we've seen IBC, and they're all connecting together, and it's like making a very flat hierarchy. I think it's integral, and we're going to see a lot of benefits from that, along with cheaper resource costs for app developers.
Can you explain inverse weighted voting, what that is, and inter-blockchain communication?
Yeah, sure. So inverse weighted voting is like, on EOS, for example, you can vote for one block producer, or you can vote for 30 block producers. Your vote still, if you have 100 EOS, your 100 EOS can go to one block producer, or it can go to 30. So what you see on EOS often is a block producer will just vote for themselves, and all the people who are getting rewards off that block producer, they will vote for that block producer, and then they'll give them a kickback, so there's a bit of collusion. But on Telos, they actually have inverse weighted voting in place, and that means like if you vote for one block producer, it only is worth 1/30th of the value. So your 100 tokens will only get you kind of 30 votes roughly. So it encourages on Telos, like if you have 100 votes, you want to vote for yourself, your block producer, and 29 other block producers, because otherwise your vote will be weakened quite significantly. So yeah, and IBC, just, that actually means like communication between separate, distinct blockchains. So a technology that Boss has invented is the ability to take your Boss tokens and move them across to the EOS chain. So your Boss tokens will get locked into a smart contract on Boss, and then there's an intermediary service in between those two blockchains that then another contract which will spin up your Boss tokens on EOS, and it also works the other way around. So tokens can flow between blockchains basically.
Yeah, so my company Aikon, we run a sister chain, right? So we made the decision to do that, and there's a couple of reasons. What you said is very relevant and viable in terms of the ecosystem. For us, what a sister chain is we're just running EOS. We're just running the exact same software that EOS runs, and we do it in a separate set of block producers, right? And the reason we do it is because we want our chain to be done, only to be running certain things. So the token economic model of the EOS chains are all about resources and a general compute platform. The idea that you can pretty much do anything with it. For our chain, we want to run the software, but we want to limit what you do on it, because that way it doesn't clog the chain with a lot of spam and things that are not relevant for that particular use, right? So for our chain, we are identity and rights management system. So we want to be the rights management system for everything. And so for that reason, we want the rights that are stored on our chain to be predictable in terms of cost. We don't want them to be super expensive because somebody is hogging the network for digital assets or whatever, some of the latest game craze. It's much more predictable if the only things that are happening on the chain are very scoped. And that's really the key difference for what we're doing. And I think if you look back at the original EOS white paper, from the very beginning, Dan Larimer and the team envisioned that it's not practical to think that there's going to be one database that's going to be running all the world's compute. It's just not going to happen. You need to have a sharded system where certain use cases run in certain areas or geographic areas or particular use cases. And so inter-blockchain communication essentially allows one chain or one shard of a chain or one component of a chain to do things that are highly localized or very valuable for that particular use, and then to talk with the rest of the chain to share assets or identity or value. So, I mean, that is really, we are helping, I think, realize the value of the chain in the ecosystem of EOS overall. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's been embraced by the community overall, because it really has been baked into the design from the beginning. And even though inter-blockchain communication technology isn't yet in the core code base, we're tracking it quite closely. You can see the commits that are happening. They've been working on this for quite a while. And it was originally going to be released in the release of June, but they pulled it back because they wanted to make sure that it was interoperable with other chains and to get some other engineering done right. So anyway, so I think that's, I think this is a really important part of the ecosystem. And I am completely confident that the number of chains is just going to continue to proliferate. And it's not, I don't see it as competitive at all with the main chain. It is just another shard or use case that benefits the entire ecosystem. So.
Yeah, and the power of the side chains and the sister chains is that it gives this opportunity to experiment with kind of a low cost. So we have Telos that is experiment with different voting methods, which is kind of one of the sticking points right now on the EOS main chain. But there's actual experiments being done to figure out how to fix that on Telos. There's Warbly, which is taking KYC and AML, so they're verifying your identity to on-ramp fiat, which is something that they can't really experiment with on the main chain because it's a bunch of crypto people who aren't going to give their identities up. But Warbly's doing it, so we can see if it works. There's Boss that's working on the inter-blockchain communication, which is going to be a feature, hopefully, of the mainnet, so all these chains can talk and the money can flow all between them seamlessly. So you start to get this picture of EOS as just one chain, but with maybe hundreds or even thousands of chains, all for specific uses, with the tokens flowing in between them. And that's kind of the grander vision. There's even Dapps that, like Ali mentioned, that are coming out with their own chains. I mentioned Eva earlier. They built they just cloned their own EOS.io chain because they don't want to have to deal with the resource. They want to have basically their own set of resources. So when inter-blockchain communication comes, those tokens will flow straight to the mainnet as well. So that is the bigger picture, and that's kind of what the next years hold for EOS, hopefully. If you guys have any, excuse me, if you guys have anything else to add on sister chains or side chains, go ahead and do that, and then we can talk about kind of the next year to 5 years in EOS, like. What do you think a possibility for a widely adopted app, or what's that small use case that tons of people would use if someone figures out how to put it on blockchain?
I can start. Okay, I would say that my feeling is that the apps that are going to be most relevant and become more popular are the ones that actually solve problems that people want to use, right? Actually make their lives easier or better, and solve real problems that are out there. And so I do feel like when I think about sort of mass adoption, I still think of micropayments as being the killer app, right? If you think back in the early days of the internet and early days of Bitcoin, micropayments are always sort of touted as being the thing that could rule the world, and micropayments are essentially, you know, if I read your article online, I like it, I can pay you 2 cents or 5 cents or whatever, really low friction. And I think about it like in terms of all the free media that I consume. Like I watch podcasts and YouTube streams and don't pay them anything, but I would totally pay somebody a quarter after I listen to a really great podcast if I could just literally respond to their tweet, like they tweet it out, or I respond to their Twitter handle and just send them a hashtag and send them money without having to have the friction of processing a payment, right? I think one of the challenges you have today with processing payments is, it costs 32 cents to do a debit card transaction. So you're not going to have a transaction that's 1 penny, and and even though you can do it with the Venmo or whatever, actually Venmo restricts, they have a limit, but they pay the fees, right? So with a cryptocurrency that is very fast and accessible to mainstream, where people can easily get an account without having to think about it, sending micropayments back and forth, and having a community where content producers can get paid directly from their subscribers without having to go through some intermediate who's going to defund them and take 90% of or 99% of the money for advertising. I think there's potential there to fix a lot of the challenges we have with news. I mean, you think about how much a lot of the news shops are closing out, right? And so many journalists are essentially shutting down shop because they can't monetize. But if they could get paid by people who could consume their assets, I think micropayments in general could be a killer app, and if you could get mainstream adoption where people would have wallets and then have money go into them. And that's the other challenge, is like how do you get money into them? And I think there's some innovative models. I'll just say one other thing, that if you ever use Brave is a browser that pays you to browse because you're getting a payment of the ad revenue that they make by display ads, right? Which is really interesting. So you log in with Brave, they create a wallet for you, and you start making money just by browsing the web. I think that's really an interesting way to sort of charge up your wallet, which you can then use to do micropayments or other things with. So so I was just generally speaking, I think to me that's ripe for adoption or whatever use.
Yeah, I think Trey's right. I think it all boils down to like microtransactions and what they will add to the world. And I think the ability to tokenize and gamify all the interactions that we have in life is quite amazing. And over the next 5 years, I can envisage people having like a lot more freedom than what they have now. In that currently now you go to a 40-hour work week type job, and you do your hours and you go home. But I envision like in the future you can interact with multiple services and make many positive interactions on many platforms and earn money off all those different platforms, whether it's like very, very small transactions. You know, it could just be things like, you know, taking your rubbish out and organizing your recycling in the right order. You know, little things like that can be monetized, and I think we can use that capability to incentivize people to do the right thing in many types of interactions in life. And ultimately, we'll be able to like live the life that we want to live and contribute to the things we want to contribute and earn money off all those things, as opposed to be stuck in a single job doing what we do.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, you just reminded me that there's a huge experiment happening in China right now about that, where like everything that you do is kind of monitored and you're incentivized to do the good stuff.
Social score, yeah.
I mean, definitely micropayment is good for one of the big use cases of blockchain, but also incentivizing good behavior for sure. But the thing that actually comes to my mind all the time is ownership. The thing with ownership is it never really changed until in the digital world, and being able to tokenize assets and have a digital footprint and actually owning a digital footprint that you are doing, whether it's your own data that you're pushing online or your real estate that you own or any kind of physical data that can become or online data that become your own property. You can own rights to it, you can monetize it. I feel like that is going to be, it's a huge kind of a shift in the way we actually deal with things on a daily basis. I think the Pixios project is trying to do that with art right now, and I feel like doing it on a wider scale for any kind of real life asset that is backed by a digital asset, and you owning part of it is going to be huge. In addition to data, for instance, DNA data and your social data that you're doing also. That is a big opportunity, and it's a big problem that needs to be solved, and I feel like blockchain is the way for that kind of solutions.
So we have one final question. We'll go around one more time, and so we'll have final thoughts with this question too. What's bigger picture as far as EOS and its possible impact on kind of the way we interact socially, globally? A little bit kind of more down the same road there, but as a final question, that's a good one to end on. For me, the value, the ability to be compensated for the value that you add into the world. Right now, like they're talking about with micropayments, right now there's so much friction. If I add value, I've got to do something worth like $5 or $10, $20 to make sense to be paid for it. You know, I'm not going to go around asking for $1 because I gave someone a tip or something. You know, like it's just not how the world works right now. But once you automatically connect value, or once you automatically connect micropayments to value that you naturally add, then all of a sudden there's this free-flowing kind of economy of people adding value along the way like they already do in their normal life, but now they're being compensated for it. And a great kind of analogy or a great way to think about it would be like, say you're on Twitter and you're funny on Twitter and you throw these tweets out and they get maybe 15 or 20,000 impressions. You don't see any value for that. There's no real way to monetize that unless you're really going hard on Twitter and you're trying to. But like if you're just a guy who's getting big tweets every once in a while, you're adding some real massive value there. There's ads and there's a lot going on there behind the scenes that you're creating value, but you'll never see any of that. And there's lots of places like that in the world where in your daily life, maybe through social media or just through your interactions that are positive, you're adding value. And I think people being kind of paid for that seamlessly is important, and also how that will unlock possibly like entire countries of mental power and potential that are kind of locked up because there's no way to trade money around. I mean, if we unlock all that human potential in somewhere like Africa with the blockchain, then all of a sudden like the whole world has a shift. And so bigger picture, that's what's so cool about blockchain, micropayments, and all of this. Kind of makes it more seamless. So And so we'll go final thoughts, big picture stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly follow up on that, that's basically, you're trying to just like explain universal basic income, and I think that's a really, I guess, one of the noble things that EOS is trying to solve as well. Not only giving access to, not only being productive for like first world countries and users and all that, but basically anyone being able to just like have the basic benefits that most people here are actually benefiting from. I really like that project, that you can just monetize your health data and make basic income out of that, and that's definitely huge, going to fly well in Africa and other third world countries. But yeah, from a big picture perspective, as long as people are using blockchain for that and kind of incentivizing for good behavior, that's basically what we're trying to go for, incentivizing good behavior and disincentivizing bad behavior. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's, who knows like what's going to happen in the future. I think the exciting thing is it's like the internet when that came about. You couldn't really imagine where it's going to go exactly, but the way to phrase it, I guess, is that, you know, at the moment there's like 300 and something countries in the world, maybe it's more, between 300 and 500 major countries. And, you know, that's how many economies there are being spun up in the world, how many different ways of running an economy. But then with the token economy, like every project is a new economy in itself, and the way it's going to create experimentation in how you can push and pull people with incentivization. And so when you have like 10,000 or 1 million different economies being spun up, that's more experimentation, and that's going to lead to like a faster pace of innovation. Just like we've seen the internet just like take the curve of innovation from like going like this to like this. So yeah, I think it's just exciting to see in the next, you know, few years what will happen from the pace of innovation just going much, much higher.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. And as blockchain comes online, I think the power of it is that it can automate processes and reduce friction, like you were saying, right, for transactions, but also the way we do life. If you think about so much of our life is structured around the way things work from an operational perspective. Think about how you get paid. If you work for, like most people work for a regular employer, you get paid every 2 weeks. Why is that? Because the cost of processing your weekly paycheck, your bi-weekly paycheck, has overhead. And that's one good example where an automated flow that checks your work schedule and pays you, you could be paid hourly for your work in a regular traditional job. And so reducing, because you don't have to have individuals doing it, you could have things automated. And the barriers of processing all the stuff that we take for granted will get lower and lower and lower as things get automated and autonomous, to good and bad, right? But to some degree, you get micromanaged based on your productivity, for example. But yeah, I definitely see that, like you say, like there's going to be so many, now that the pace of innovation is going to drive much faster based on how quickly we can innovate on these economic models and incentive models, and that's ultimately what drives the economy and drives us as human beings, right? We're all very much driven around incentives, and so blockchain is all about incentives and disincentives and driving the economy to drive value. So I agree. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to look back 10 years from now and think, God, Jesus, how could we have gotten on without this? And just like we look back on the internet, like I watched this thing, one of our coworkers had posted on our channel with an interview of Jeff Bezos 20 years ago, talking about how it's early days and people are going to buy things online and on the web, and even though you can't imagine that, and you're going to have stuff delivered to your door, you're never going to have to go shopping. It's like, how ridiculous is that? And that's completely the way it is right now. It's like 20 years from now, things are going to be radically different because of blockchain. Who knows where it's going to go, but yeah, pretty significant.
Yeah, so we'll be doing this probably once every month or 2 months, so we'll invite you guys back. But just, I always like to remind people to take a time to appreciate kind of this moment in time. Like we're in San Francisco with this bleeding edge technology and getting to be a part of it. It's just really cool to think about where we are and the interesting things that might happen in the next couple of years. So thanks a lot for you guys for coming. We got Ali, he's got the Lumeos project. Look into that. We got Justin, Infinity Block, which is a block producer for EOS, Mainnet, and Talos. We've got Trey, who's CTO of Aikon. That is a sister chain to EOS. And I'm with a co-founder with some of my co-founders here of EOS San Francisco block producer, and I have the EOS podcast. So if you guys want to, while you're working, learn about EOS and not really be working, then listen to my podcast. That's what's up. So thank you guys. Cheers. Does anyone have any questions? If there's any, here, let's ask a question here.
Yeah, so my question is, when we talked about the state of Dapps in regards to what people are building, what is your where does your perception or perspective of the state of Dapps in regards to distribution and people adopting it? Because we know that airdrops, for example, have been growing. So what do you think the future looks like for people actively using, learning about, being exposed to the variety of options that are out there as market saturation or DApp saturation increases?
Yeah, okay. Really, our company exists to help people build dApps for real people, right? So this is kind of core to our, and I would say that our goal is to make it so that users do not have to think about the blockchain, but still benefit from it, right? So as a developer, you should be able to build a blockchain app without having to be a blockchain expert. Users should be able to use your app without having to know what plugins they need for their wallet structure or whatever, or where their keys are. So I definitely think that in order for us to gain mainstream adoption, the barrier has to be reduced both on developers and users. To me, that's a huge barrier. I think we've all brought it up during the course of the conversation. Well, I guess to me, that's the key, right? We just need to reduce barriers and make it really easy. Ultimately, people don't care about blockchain, I think. People care about the app that they're using and what the value is out of that.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the point I made earlier that, users, Facebook would never have taken off if you had to go to an exchange and buy crypto just to interact with it. Yeah, and it's just too complicated. So solutions like ORID, where you can sign up with Facebook and start interacting and start earning money, I think that's the future, and that's the way that we're going to move forward.
Well, I mean, that's the future, but as it is right now, there's so much going on. There's so many new projects, there's so many airdrops. Only on EOS, at least. If you are just in EOS, there's so much to keep track of. Even there's so many things outside of EOS happening at the same time. So from a user perspective, from just an individual perspective, keeping track of all this is how it is right now. Hopefully that's going to change in the future for sure. But one thing you can do is you can just start to study what's happening, what's going on, who's doing what, who's kind of just doing an airdrop for attention rather than for the actual technology, which is something we have to be careful about. And but fortunately, through this kind of a bear market that's happened, it's leading to the higher quality projects to start coming up more often than just the hyped up projects. So I feel like that's what we should be just looking at right now until we stop talking about tokens and airdrops and more talking about products and services. Hopefully that will happen within 5 years. Yeah.
Cool. Any more questions?
We've gone by sort of a strange experiment with a number of government offices closed for a while, and some fraction of their employees being asked to keep on producing without compensation whatsoever. Now, there's a thought up there about the anti-money laundering regulations, the Know Your Customer regulations, and one of the branches of the chains is actually taking that on, whereas thoughts are, if some of the objectives are perhaps to cause those actors, the ones who can impose those regulations to begin with, to lose their reason to exist. That's at least one of the considerations that I don't see all that much thought time on. That there's people that are taking forth those regulations. But if your concept of social justice, of liberty for personnel, for individual persons, is such that you say, or even the China thing, the monitoring of the people's emotions. That's one of the things that a few of the technologies, such as eye tracking, together with the neural measurements, you get to say to a person, you're sort of excited now, go home and come back tomorrow. These ideas of choosing directions to try to get some of the actors that we've grown tired of to go away. That's one of the things that I'd like to hear some people's thoughts about.
It's a very big topic. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to. I'm not saying I'm okay with completely forgiving, like getting rid of your privacy for social good. I feel like it has to be complemented with something, like with some you being in control of what's happening, but still under the governance of a well-spread constitution. And I mean, I feel like that's in line with what we're trying to achieve with the new economies that we're launching with blockchains, right? It's like we have governance models that majority of people have voted on. Yes, this is right and this is wrong, so that you as a user should say, okay, I'll do this so that I don't get penalized, and I'll not do that. I'll do that so that I can get rewarded. So, yeah, that's what I have in mind. For sure, like if we start losing our freedom because of a certain governance, then that's a very bad future, in my opinion. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, the blockchain movement is really about sovereignty of the individual, and it's really kind of almost the opposite of the possible scenario. It's combating that scenario, and part of the reason why is because you always retain autonomy and the option to use whatever blockchain or system. You get to choose and leave and enter these blockchains or these incentive systems as you want. So the example with China, or the example with possibly what you used was, monitoring emotions and incentivizing or penalizing those emotions. Sure, maybe a blockchain comes out with that, but I wouldn't be a part of that one personally. I would opt out and I would go on a sister chain that has nothing to do with that, where I can live how I want. Maybe there's someone who feels like they're always smiling and they want to be a part of that chain because it benefits them. Fine, to each their own. But that's what this is all about, is the ability to have full control over your own identity. All the information that's in your identity is black boxed, and you have the ability to release the pieces of information to whoever you want. Right now, all our information is out there and everyone's grabbing it as fast as they can and making money off of it. Blockchain puts it in a nice little safe that you own, like you should, and you choose where it goes. And you also choose where you're interacting. And so, to me, it's the solution to that idea that you're posing now.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add. I think Brandon perfectly summarized it. Blockchain gives you the ability to choose which governance you want to go with. You don't need to, opt into that system if you don't want. I think we'll see change in the role of government. I think it will be like you choose where you live, and that will be where you pay tax, or I think it will kind of be decentralized where you end up being kind of controlled by where you live. But for everything else, you will have total free reign to choose which, models you want to engage in, which ones you don't want to engage in.
Yeah, cool question. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Mari Ferrari?
Yeah, I heard you mention earlier, I heard mention there was an app, I guess, that allowed you to see some of the dApps that were being made. Is that the closest equivalent that we have to the Google Play Store and Apple Play Store? Or where are we looking, because that's kind of where I was kind of going, like where are we going in regards to the curation, identification of applications that are useful and for purposes that people would be interested in? What applications are you seeing that are walking that path, or are there currently that people should be looking out for, utilizing to better sift and identify projects that match with their interests?
I mentioned the EOS Links wallet, which I really like because it's easy for you to create an account, but it also shows you apps you can discover. Of course, those are just the dApps that are part of their ecosystem. And then there are plenty of sites that are out there. Dapp Radar is one where a lot of apps are discovered. So I think it's a space that needs to be addressed, though, because a lot of the sites really don't have good coverage of all the apps that are out there. But there's plenty of ways to find them, I suppose, and Google them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think we'll see something like a Play Store or an Apple App Store. I think that's the future. At the moment, we've got Dapp Radar, which kind of orders everything on how many transactions are occurring on that app, but there's some faults in that it's easy to kind of fake transactions and get your app up there. I think we'll see like an on-chain review system that will allow the community to curate the app list, but that's definitely like an exciting area that I've been thinking about recently. Like, someone needs to build that app store and that decentralized curation of apps, combined with an easy way to interact with all those chains that those apps are on. Because we're going to see kind of apps on EOS, we're going to see them on Telos and Worbly, and you want to like be able to interact with all of them from the one space. We'll also see them on Ethereum and completely different technologies. So yeah, I think it's an exciting area.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the wallets and the websites are. The data is there. It just needs to be shown to you. There's a few websites that does it. That does just that, and then there's a few wallets that allow you to run the app even inside the wallet itself. I mean, that's why I like EOS Links.
That's a killer idea. EOS Play Store. That's a big one. Sounds easy too. Cool. Anyone else have any questions? All right. Really appreciate you guys' time, and this was fun. Thank you. Cheers.
Hello, EOS people. I came here for a couple of for the social impact meetup, and I do know Matt. Yeah, Jamar. Sergey. Pleasure, man.
Such a good question. You were really a very thoughtful person.
Okay, yeah.